The first issue of Absolute Flash is finally here, so let's not waste any time and just jump straight into the breakdown. Our story kicks off somewhere in the middle of a barren desert with 15-year-old Wally West frantically questioning what he's done and exclaiming that he's ruined everything as power uncontrollably surges throughout his entire body. And soon enough, the power and whatever memory he was dwelling on flooded his mind so intensely that he couldn't hold back from breaking out into tears. But desperate to regain at least some of his composure, eventually he reminded himself that he just needed to breathe in order for things to slow back down. Before getting to see what he'd do next in the present day though, we're then taken back 2 days into the past with him walking along some train tracks during a cold and rainy day. And while passing a random group of kids hanging out at a gas station, he began thinking about how isolated and alone he was, which reminded him how much better things were when his mom was still alive, because she knew exactly how to calm his racing mind down when he obsessively thought about all of his problems. After that, we find out that he actually lives on a military base regarded as Fort Fox, but upon arriving to the front entrance, he was confronted by 2 soldiers, indicating that his father would be pissed if he knew he was out past his curfew. But moments later, none other than Dr. Barry Allen came to his defense, expressing they should cut the kid some slack because they probably did the same thing back when they were young. As we move forward, the issue cuts over to Barry walking Wally the rest of the way home, but upon their arrival, Barry asked Wally if he wanted to see something cool because he felt bad about leaving him by himself. So they made their way to a highly advanced secret lab where a bunch of monkeys were being experimented on inside these little pods. So Wally asked Barry what they were working on down there, and Barry indicated it was something called Project Olympus. He couldn't tell him everything about it because it was highly classified, but what he could tell him about it was that they were working on the very razor's edge of physics and biology. A few moments later, Barry expressed that Wally was a super smart kid and he wouldn't mind him working in the lab with him part-time. Even though things down there were super classified, he was confident he could pull some strings and convince Wally's dad to be on board. But that's when Wally's dad Rudy appeared, making it very clear that he was not okay with this and telling Wally that he knew about him sneaking out earlier. So Wally tried defending himself and expressing that he just lost track of time, but it quickly turned into a yelling match that Barry couldn't stand to watch. So once again he came to Wally's defense, telling Rudy to take it easy and have some compassion because it was clear that Wally was bored out of his mind living on this military base. But completely disregarding what he had to say, Rudy expressed that he should be minding his own damn business and that he was lucky that he didn't report this to the higher-ups. After that, the story fast forwards back over to the desert in present day, with Wally exclaiming that he never should have gone with Barry and never should have stayed with his dad. He should have just ran away when he had the chance and never looked back. But moments later, he wasn't able to dwell on the past any longer because some sort of giant weaponized convoy was headed right towards him while shooting out some sort of futuristic boomerang. So he made a break for it into a nearby cave and eventually managed to get the boomerang off his tail, but that's when the people chasing him actually step out of their vehicle and we realize that it's a very different and seemingly militarized version of Captain Cold, Boomerang, and Flash's other rogues. So they start organizing a plan and expressing that they're gonna split up and flank Wally in order to bring him in. Meanwhile, Wally just kept on running throughout the cave while experiencing sporadic bursts of his powers because at this point in time he still hadn't harnessed them. But before being able to see how things would unfold, the comic takes another detour into the past with Wally in the middle of playing guitar. But moments later he was interrupted by his father asking if they could sit down and talk for a few moments about the incident in the lab. Rudy would then go on to express that the things they were working on down there were very dangerous, and although this was his job and he needed to be there, he also needed to make sure Wally was safe. But Wally felt like his dad was completely disregarding his own well-being, expressing that all he did was sit in his room alone and that at least Barry showed some interest in him and could tell that he had potential. Nevertheless, Rudy just continued to ignore his son's feelings and what he had to say, telling him that he wasn't allowed to see Barry any longer. So Wally grabbed his jacket, expressed that mom would have left him a long time ago if she was still alive, and then darted out of the house into the pouring rain to make his way back to the lab. But immediately upon his arrival, he was caught in the middle of some sort of crazy experiment being directed by Barry, and knowing that this could only lead to disaster, Barry began demanding him to run before things got out of hand. Now after that, the story goes back over to present day, with the rogues slowly closing in on Wally's location while chasing him inside of the cave. But as Wally continued trying to escape, he was yet again overwhelmed by the memory of what had happened back at the lab that night. And when it was all said and done and he just couldn't keep on running anymore, we realized implies that somehow his interference with the experiment resulted in Barry's death, as we see Barry's rotted skeleton laying in one of the corners of the cave. As we move forward though, the story then takes a huge jump 1 year into the future, where we see none other than Mirror Master at the site of the freak accident requesting access to all of the lab's archives. And upon doing so, we get to see some of the aftermath of Barry's death. And it looks like Wally has a new friend slash sidekick in one of the lab monkeys. He also eventually got a new suit, and then there's like an entire city being overrun by apes. So we don't know what exactly is going on, but we have enough room to draw some cool theories and whatnot. With that being said though, that's when Absolute Flash comes to an end, but if you want to see what happens in the next issue, let me know in the comments down below.